What's up everyone, welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be covering my more budget focused, more kitchen sink focused, because that was the way that I felt like this deck should progress, with a little more budget focus in mind, because there's actually a lot of cool tools that we didn't have access to previously when this deck first came out, when I first looked at playing this as a more budget deck. But yeah, let's jump right into it. Starting off, we have our pretty standard Shaddoll line that I've been running for a while now. 3 Shaddoll Wendy, 3 Shaddoll Squamata, 2 Shaddoll Hedgehog, and 2 Shaddoll Beast, and 1 Shaddoll Ariel. And then for this deck list, the Falco doesn't quite make the cut. I don't know, the card doesn't really do as much as you would want to. I want it to. I could see playing it at 1, potentially cutting a beast for it, or cutting a beast for something like a dragon if you want that more additional utility. Typically when I side, a beast comes out for a dragon, but also with this deck, like I said, no Falco. The Falco only really comes up when you have the ability to send a card to the graveyard but not fusion summon yet, so you need it as the additional monster to fusion summon, and like Wendy in most cases could do that just as well. So I feel like maybe there's a case for it, but I personally don't like it too much because opening it with other cards doesn't let you play as well or plus as much as the other Shaddolls do. Continuing on to the first package that we're playing 3 copies of Vision Hero Vion, 1 Shadow Mist, and 1 copy of Elemental Hero Honest Neos. At this point, I think I've talked this engine to death. I really love the hero engine in this deck as my dedicated normal summon. I feel like this just fixes all the problems that Mathematician doesn't, that Armonite doesn't, that any of just the generic send cards don't, that the Spellbook engine, the Spellbook normal summon doesn't as well, and so I'd really just love this engine. Next, we have a return because we're playing a more budget-focused build. We need higher quality lights because our play starters are not as good, so we need to consistently open Shaddoll fusions, or fusion spells plus light monsters. So in that regard, we're playing 2 copies of Damage Juggler and 1 copy of Trick Clown. Wanted to try to find room for 3 copies of Damage Juggler and 1 copy of Hat Tricker as well, but the deck space is very, very tight, as you'll see. If you wanted to cut one of these engines to bump this up to a higher count, that'd be really good. I think at the very minimum, playing 1 copy of Damage Juggler, 1 copy of Trick Clown is very, very strong because of the access that you get to it off of Shaddoll Fusion, and the amount of play extension that this engine gives you is really fantastic. Also, it can surprise your opponent because when they go in for game, you can just block OTKs with your Damage Jugglers, and then that'll turn into a search on the next turn. Next, we have our 2 Phantom Knight monsters, Phantom Knight of Ancient Cloak and 1 Phantom Knights of Silent Boots. As you guys will probably see and probably figure out very quickly, we have 4 separate engines in this deck. We have Shaddolls, we have Performage, we have Heroes, we have Phantom Knights. So all of these have like really good synergy with each other. The Phantom Knights engine is something that we weren't able to play when this deck first dropped because Rusty Barty was banned at the time. I believe it was banned at the time, so we didn't get to experiment with that at all. But these actually add a lot of flexibility, or not, they add a lot of power to your combos, giving you the ability to end on not monster-based disruptions, which is very strong, as well as the ability for Fog Blade to actually just stop attacks is really strong because it can help you protect your window very well. And then that's it for the monsters. You'll notice there's no hand traps in this deck right now. That's because there's not really a ton of space. I think you could make room for them if you go second, but for now I'm only playing a card that I'll show you as we go in later because we have the room for it again. But just with all of the different monster engines that we're playing and want to be able to consistently open well, the hand traps got cut for a little bit different of cards. Moving on to our fusion spells, we have 3 copies of Shaddoll Fusion, 3 copies of El Shaddoll Fusion, and 2 copies of Polymerization. These are our main fusion play starters for the deck. Playing a maxed out count is really good. El Shaddoll gets a lot better because we're able to play maximum number of constructs in this deck, so we want to see them as much as possible because we don't have any other play enablers. Polymerization, because it's very good. Just seeing a Polymerization lets you play the game. It's searchable off of our Vision Hero Vion, and also Vision Hero Vion isn't once per turn for that banish a hero monster to search polymerization effect, and that regularly comes up. If you guys have seen the combo video that's posted before this one, you'll see that there's actually a combo that searches out both polymerizations during the turn, which is pretty strong. So that's it for our fusion spells. We're playing a high number in this deck so that we can consistently see them with our light monsters. And then moving on, or just consistently see fusion cards together with other stuff. And then after that, we have the card that I think is the pseudo replacement for hand traps at the moment, Super Polymerization. This card is going to allow you to break boards pretty efficiently. It's pretty strong. This could also be just a Dark Ruler no more. But that card was a little bit pricier. I think this card's actually only a couple bucks right now. I actually didn't check before this video, but I know it's been reprinted into the ground at this point. Maybe a few dollars, but Dark Ruler No Mores are a little bit more expensive, so I opted to play Super Polymerizations. If you go the route of playing just 3 main deck Dark Ruler No Mores or 3 main deck Nibiru's, that actually opens up a little bit of the space in the extra deck, which we'll talk about later. But this card is really fantastic because you're playing Shaddolls, right? So like you can fuse away your opponent's stuff to make your own cards, and we have some pretty quality targets in the extra deck for what we expect to see in the metagame. And then the last 3 spells in the deck, just 3 power spells, 1 reinforcement to the army to make our deck a little bit more consistent with those Vions. They also search Phantom Knight cards, but I don't know how often that's actually going to come up. Maybe if you open a Boots or something and you don't open any other Shaddolls, then you can search your Cloak and then make plays that way, or get into your plays that way. E-Telly is just really fantastic as just basically the 7th copy of El Shaddoll, or Ray Shaddoll Wendy. That you could see in your opening hand. You could make room by cutting other cards in this deck and then potentially also play Ogres with this or Gammas with this as well. And then in that regard it gets bonus utility because if you have access to a Wendy and you open E-Telly, you can set your E-Telly and then during your opponent's turn you can activate it to put an Ogre onto the field to give you an additional disruption. And then the traps in our deck, we mostly just have engine traps here, no actual traps. We have 1 copy of Shade Brigandine, Phantom Knights of Shade Brigandine, and 2 copies of Phantom Knights Fogblade. These pair well with our Phantom Knights engine. There's different combos. Some combos use this, some combos go through both of these. Really just having the flexibility for this to be an additional extender is very good, or the ability to make rank 4s because rank 4s right now, or Abyss Dweller is never really bad. It's never not good. So like the ability to go into it or any other rank 4 that you might want to play in this deck is very solid. And then the last 2 traps in the deck, we have 1 Ray Shaddoll Incarnation for our combos and 1 Shaddoll Schism because this card is nuts. Actually just insane, the amount of power and value that this generates for you every single turn after you activate it. It's basically a +2 every turn, and that's your turn and your opponent's turn potentially because you can summon Construct. Construct effect will dump a card that'll get you a free plus. So it's pretty good in that regard. And then that's it for the main deck. Moving on to the extra deck, we have 3 copies of Shaddoll Construct because this is your key playmaker of the deck. I wanted to make room for other Shaddoll monsters, but this one in a pure Shaddoll list, where we're always going through it for every single one of our combos because Schism is so good now. I'm just playing it at 3. I don't want to run out of this card. Next, we have 2 copies of El Shaddoll Winda. This card is also fantastic. Definitely need to play 2 copies of it because sometimes you need to go through your first before you go into your plays, and you still want to be able to wall them out with the second copy. And then the last Shaddoll monster in the extra deck, unfortunately, we only had room for 6 in this variant of the deck, is El Shaddoll Apkallone. This is just necessary at 1 for certain plays. It's good to summon off of Schism to turn things off. It's good to search Schism. Like, this card just does a good amount of things, but I think it loses out a little bit in utility compared to the 3rd copy of Construct, so we're only playing 1 copy of Apkallone. And then continuing on, the last 2 fusions in the deck, 1 Dragon Knight Draco Akist and 1 Starving Venom Fusion Dragon. These are our super poly targets. This is basically outs like many boards, or many of the dark boards that you put double dark on the board that end on like Dragoon plus something else. Like this outs Dragoon plus Dragoons plus Savage Dragons, even outs like Shaddoll Windas having access to this. Also, Draco Knight Akist is very good because it helps you out the Infernoble board because you're able to fuse away their Savage Dragon as well as their Charles. Turning off Charles is pretty important because the ability to just target pop something is very, very strong. Having things that are not hard negates but are just general disruptions typically tend to be a little bit better than negates because you can control when you disrupt your opponent. And then Charles can be a little bit difficult to out as well, especially since our main way to out it would be Shaddoll Construct. And if they have a is it Ogier? It's Ogier or Oliver equipped to it, it can't be destroyed by card effects. So this gives you another way to out that card. And then moving on to our links. Most of the links are in here for combo. We have a couple utility slots, but we have Cross Sheep, Barricade Board Blocker, the Phantom Knights of Rusty Bardiche, IP Masquerena, Appaloosa Bow the Goddess, Nightmare Unicorn, and Boral Sword Dragon. All of these cards are relatively inexpensive now, especially Appaloosa. Appaloosa, I believe, is like $10 or something like that, which makes me feel kind of dumb. I actually spent $10 on this Japanese copy, and I could have just bought an English one instead. But I'm not even really playing at locals right now, so it's okay either way. But yeah, all these cards are pretty good. Cross Sheep is pretty nutty in this deck. Barricade Borg. There might be something better than Barricade Borg to play as your generic Dark, but this has been my snap go-to for that. Phantom Knight, Rusty Bardiche. I'm not really sure why they unbanned this card, but I'm super excited for it. I'm actually super looking forward to the new PK stuff that's coming out in the next set. Really looking forward to building that. And IP Masquerena gives you the ability to interrupt your opponent. The main IP cards that we're playing are Unicorn and Appaloosa. If you've checked out the combos, you can see how we set up the IP play. And yeah, and then Boral Sword Dragon, this could be anything else as well. I have Boral Sword in here because this is kind of like a throwback to one of the first Shaddoll videos that I made that featured Boral Sword, and since we had room, I wanted to put him back in. And then the last card in the extra deck for now is a 1 copy of Abyss Dweller. This is just the 1 rank 4 that we're playing. Arguably, this could be Baguska because I don't believe it shuts off your window. This could be a Tornado Dragon depending on your matchups. But yeah, Abyss Dweller is pretty good. Basically turns off dinos. Dinos have a really hard time playing through this. Other decks have a really hard time playing through this. And overall, it's just been a very good card forever, and I'm glad they finally gave it the ulti printing that it deserved. And then for cards to consider in your extra deck, these are all cards that I kind of wanted to play but couldn't really find the room for. I wanted to make room for a Tornado Dragon, but there just really wasn't the space. Like I said, you could swap out these Super Polys for Dark Ruler No Mores. And those might be a little bit better, but I think that Super Poly had a little bit more utility, and it was a little bit cheaper of a card, and that was the main focus of this particular build. But that would actually clear up 2 extra deck slots for things that you'd want to play. Personally, I think I might main the Tornado Dragon, as well as the 1 copy of El Shaddoll Shekinaga, but these are just some of the other options that you could play. I think that having a higher count of Shaddolls would be very beneficial. Most of the combos actually enable you to go into a Shekinaga or a Anoyatilis on your first turn. Anoyatilis doesn't have like the most insane amount of value, but it could potentially get more value going forward as we see what the new ritual decks can do, because this kind of just shuts off rituals. And then Grista is really cool because if you play Grista in your main deck, you can actually super poly with your opponent's board. Like, you could alternatively play Grista instead of the Draco Akist as your super poly target for fire, and then just make Grista, and then if they try to summon something, then you can negate. I think this card's always been a little bit mediocre. However, since we got Proxy F Magician, other variants of Shaddolls might have an easier time making Grista because Proxy F in the grave plus any Shaddoll will make this, which is pretty good. And yeah, like I said, Tornado Dragon or any other rank 4 that you might want to play. It could be a Time Thief Redoer. That card is not terrible, especially considering that we're playing the Shade Brigadine, so it's really easy to get the trap underneath the Time Thief Redoer. But these are all cards that I wanted to play in my deck. I kind of wanted to play the 2nd copy of Apkalon, but couldn't find the room. Kind of wanted to play the Shekinaga. Kind of wanted to play the Tornado Dragon, especially since sometimes your deck can struggle a little bit against back row heavy decks. Especially cards like There Can Only Be One. They lock you out of summoning additional copies of any spellcasters. But that being said, let me know what you guys think about this more budget-focused build. I know that a few people have been asking for it. It's something I've been thinking about for a little while too. I was kind of beating my head against the wall for a little bit, mostly because I would be test-handing different combos with different budget like different more quote-unquote budget variants of this deck that didn't have to go through Dragoons or Needle Fiber. And honestly, like, it just kind of sucked. Not the needle fiber. Not playing with needle fiber was no big deal, right? But not sometimes I'd end up with like 2 cards left on my field, and I'm like, this could just be a Verte Anaconda. That'd be really good here. Or like sometimes I'm like, oh, I really want to just go use the link cross to link down to give me the light on board, plus like link token, or like the link monster to turn into 2 light monsters, and then have that be able to turn into my generic link. Which is pretty good. I think there's some ways to upgrade this deck for sure. I think this deck is in the weirdest spot is that the extra deck always seems to be super tight because you always have to play like 6 copies of Shaddolls. You're always playing some number of link monsters, so finding room to play the other cards that you want to play can be a little bit tough. But that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this profile. Let me know what you guys have been rocking for your more budget-focused builds that don't use Verte or needle fiber to do most of their combo brunt work. I'm curious to see what other people came up with. That being said, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.